want to inspire people to not only take control of their financial lives, but their futures in general. You've got to go get it. You've got to go make it happen. No one's going to give anything to you. You can do it. Rogan would ever do a podcast with Fauci?
It'd be interesting. I don't know if he would or not. I would hope. I think he would.
I don't know if he would. That's the thing. I was talking about this with someone the other day. I was like, I wonder if he would do it. I know he said he didn't want to do one with Trump.
Well, I think he said like the stress of it. Well, did you ever listen to or see like when Maron did the podcast with Obama?
No.
So Maron did a podcast with Obama, Mark Maron, and he was talking about how like when they did the podcast, like they literally like the day before came, swept his whole house, like went into like threw all of his stuff at his house, and then that day he had to like send out stuff to like his neighbors or whatever, or like his neighbors had to be made aware the day before that they were literally shutting down the street for Obama to come in.
That's insane.
So like obviously that's not going to be like with Fauci, but like if he was doing that with Trump, I would assume it'd be like close to the same thing at that point.
Yeah, that's so weird. He said he'd love to do one with Obama. They were actually the guy who we had on there the other day. He was talking about how his guest was trying to set up something like a meeting. I'm not sure what it was, but he would have been there. So it would have been Trump, Obama, and then him as the moderator. And it was going to be a 3-hour segment. 1 hour where he kind of asked them questions. 1 hour where the audience asked them questions. So it'd be like a pre-recorded thing. They would like get the questions ahead of time.
Yep.
And then there was one, the last hour, what was it? Oh, they just have a conversation themselves. I'm like, that's a recipe for disaster. I wonder how that would go.
I wonder like, and I mean, outside of what it normally is, like, or what we are kind of portrayed for, like, I wonder what their real conversation would be. Like, would they be as cutthroat as like they make themselves?
That's the thing. I'm not sure.
I mean, it's tough to see. Did you see that picture today? Well, I guess it came out like within the last couple of days of like Biden getting the booster shot, and then like it literally shows the picture that it's a set.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what? Like, why?
That's
like,
so
dude,
funny.
whether or not like vaccine or no regardless of that, like, why not just like not have a set? Like, what do you need the set for?
Yeah, right.
Like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea. Anyway, why don't you go ahead and take it away here? Why don't you get a little bit into about yourself, who you are, how we know each other?
Cool. So my name's Matt. I've been training jiu-jitsu for a long time, which is kind of what I guess our plan is today to talk about. And I started... we know each other, I guess, through the gym. We started both lifting. I think probably first met at Ocean State. That was the first.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, a while ago now. It's crazy to think of. And I like, ironically, I was actually doing that for to kind of have something to do because I had stopped doing jiu-jitsu during that time. When I got out of school, basically, so to start everything off, I started wrestling when I was 5 years old. That was like my sport or whatever. I wanted to do hockey. Came from a background that I just don't have any money really. So when I went to go play hockey, my parents were like, no way. They're like, dude, we're like 22 right now. We can't afford you to like be playing hockey at 5 years old. So I came home like probably a week later, I think it was. And I had a flyer for wrestling. And I thought literally when I got the flyer that I was going to be doing professional wrestling. Like I was obsessed with WWF at the time.
You were the guy.
I was 100% in, like fully in, dude, committed. And all I talked about, my parents, like, when they could, would give me the pay-per-views and whatever. So I thought I was signing up for that. So I signed up for it. My parents were like, yeah, sure. Like, I think they borrowed the money from my grandmother to like pay the registration fee and then bought me some shoes, which were like $25 or whatever at the time. And I show up for the first day and I have it in my brain, like turning to my dad. He's a tall guy. So I like pull on his like shirt and I'm like, Dad, like, where's the ring? And he's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, he's like, what are you talking about? Because here I am, and there's like, I'm 5, and like the oldest kid there is maybe like 14 or something like that. But I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, this is like, why are they're all like running around, working out. There's no ring. They're just doing push-ups. I'm like terrified. And so I wrestled my whole first year. Because my dad told me, he's like, dude, we have no money and you begged me to sign you up for this. You're going to finish the whole season. Boy. That's all there is to it. I lost every single match.
There you go.
Yeah, right? Great way to start. You can only go up from there. And probably cried every match. And then basically from there, what happened was for some godforsaken reason, I decided the next year I was going to sign up again. And I just never stopped. I went all through high school wrestling. Never did anything crazy, but I love to do it. Like, I think best I ever finished was like 5th in the state my senior year. And it was very tough because I didn't really commit to other sports during the off season. So I would normally go through this phase of like already being a fat kid when I was younger. And then like literally like I'd get into wrestling season, get in really good shape, and then just go right back to being a fat kid. And so I didn't like ever really have the opportunities to like, or at least was never impressed on me, the opportunities to be training during the off season or anything like that. Or like there's kids out there that are like 6, 7, even like up to like 13 years old that go through their whole life doing these like off season trainings and blah, blah, blah. And, other tournaments. So they never stop wrestling all year. And those are always the best kids. So I got through all of that. I graduated high school. I didn't go anywhere for wrestling. I had applied to Rhode Island College, and I would have been a walk-on there if I had tried to get onto it. But I decided to go to a different school. Didn't offer any sports really, just intramurals. And so because of that, when I got to college, I got super fat. I was up to 280 pounds.
Wow.
And yeah, legit, man. And it wasn't like a good, like I have muscles, 280 pounds at all. Like it was like just full on pork chop.
And what were you when you first got there? Do you remember?
When I first showed up, I was probably around 220 to 225. So like within 2 years of being at school, I'd put on probably like close to 60, 65 pounds, somewhere in there. Yeah, dude, like a tick, like massive.
Yeah.
And so I can remember this day too. I stepped on the scale. I was living at my grandparents at the time. And it was, I think like right before my 21st birthday, somewhere in there. And I stepped on the scale and it said like, I say 280 all the time, but it said like 279.8 or something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm done.
Round down.
Yeah. I was like, I am done with this. And so, I looked around and I was like, at this point, especially, and there's more opportunities now, but, in 2011, it was like, there wasn't a big push for like wrestling really. Having said that, there was like not really like a place for you to go besides college to start wrestling.
Right.
And so I was like, what's the next best thing? I'd always kind of watched UFC. I was big into, jujitsu in terms of like seeing that it worked and that it was always, another option in terms of grappling and everything. So I signed up and the rest, as they say, is history, I guess. I just started training all the time. I was taking the bus I'd go to my classes, and I would take the bus back home to my apartment in Quincy because I had moved at that time. Took the bus to the apartment in Quincy, and I would get off of that and go to Team Trifecta, which was a Brazilian top team affiliate and one of the other big schools in the area. And I just started training and just made it more and more often. And now that was, as I was obviously a white belt at that time, just starting, having no idea. And then, I just kept doing it since. The only break I've had really in time period was when I was, had just graduated school. Mm-hmm. And I was doing nights. I'm a nurse. So I was doing night shift for a long time, and I found myself not really training, even though I was like paying to train. I was like kind of coming up with excuses at that time because I was so exhausted and just going through a rough mental time too at that point.
Right.
So I wasn't training for probably about like 3 to, I'd say like majority of 4 years. I didn't step on a mat at all, which is why during that time, actually, we had met each other.
Gotcha. I was going to ask that.
Yeah. Back at Ocean State, because that was kind of how I filled that void.
Right.
I have to do something competitive all the time, like whether that's just competitive against myself or whether that's competitive in jiu-jitsu with another person or whatever the case is. It always has to be something competitive with me, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And so that was how I measured it, was, via lifting and, just powerlifting, nothing crazy at all. I did a couple meets obviously for that. Just trying to beat myself more than anything. And then when I got the opportunity to go on day shift, literally the day after I was offered the position, I went and signed up at the Jiu-Jitsu Academy. That was nearest. Yeah.
Was that the only reason you weren't training, was just because of the job?
job and like mental health overall.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think at the time it was to make myself willing to commit to like what I knew I would want to, like where I was at. It was tough to picture in my mind training so often, so frequently, graduating and then training like a third of that time realistically. And that for me, I was like, am I wasting my time? And I think I justified that. And, you know, realistically, it wasn't really that way.
Right.
And so, like, thinking of it now, had I wished I trained, like, sure. But, like, at the same time, like, I got to do something like powerlifting at that time, which, you know, wasn't my end goal by any means. But it was a good period of time for me to, like, put effort into something else. And I think it benefited me because even when I started doing jiu-jitsu again, all of a sudden I went from, like, somebody who never lifted. Even when I first started, I never lifted. It was just, like, show up and do jiu-jitsu. And I started losing weight, and, like, body weight training was just, like, part of it, you know, push-ups, sit-ups, all those sort of things. So that was the extent of it. And then once I actually started lifting, I was like, it's a clear carryover, obviously. Right. I think anyone that says it doesn't help, it's kind of silly in that sense. But it was an obvious carryover once I started like training full-time again. Yeah.
Did you stop powerlifting almost immediately when you went back to jiu-jitsu?
No, I tried hard to keep going both, man. It was bad. Basically, like, I shouldn't say bad. I think it was my... I'll say like my programming, which was always just by myself at that point in terms of like balancing the two,
right?
Was not very good, and I wasn't very good at it. Like, I just didn't have the knowledge on how to like properly balance. Like, you know, in my mind, I should be training 5 days of jiu-jitsu a week, and then I'm trying to fit in with those 5 days a couple of, you know, lifting sessions at least, even if it's just 3, but those lifting sessions are lifting like a power lifter. So I'm like kind of going, not max effort, but in a high, like my CNS is always engaged. Like it's, between that and then training hard, I was just finding that I was like, I don't ever remember a time I specifically got sick or anything, but I was always feeling just like shit all the time. Right. Like it was just, you felt it every day. You know what I mean? And like, I wasn't getting hurt. And I actually, I think to that point, I think that, it helps a lot. Like, I think lifting really complements jiu-jitsu in that sense that, like, even if you're doing stuff that's not powerlifting, you're still strengthening your joints. You're still moving in a different plane other than these, like, weird getting your joints yanked on and everything else. Like, it kind of reinforces what you have, so...
What was your initial experience with jiu-jitsu when you first got in there, when you first signed up?
So my first ever initial experience was actually training with, I went to this one school one day in Alston, a place called Y Crew, and I didn't know who this was at the time, but a gentleman named John Howard. He was he was a previous UFC fighter. I think he's had like, I don't know, over 5 fights in the UFC or something. He was the first guy I ever rolled with, and I had no idea who this was. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just like, it's wrestling, but I get to like choke people with it. And so I was like, that was my mindset. The problem was that John literally didn't touch me with his hands and was just using his feet, and like keeping his distance from me, and was just like flipping me over onto my back, whatever he wanted to, just sweeping me, as we call it in jiu-jitsu. And he was doing these sweeps to me, and I'm like getting angry at this point. Like, not where I'm gonna like fight this dude because he's obviously fucked me up. But I'm like, what the hell? Like, you feel this helpless person because you're like, oh, like you're getting angry, but you realize at the same time you're like, my anger doesn't matter. Like, I can't do anything right now.
Just
so like,
anyway.
Like if he wants to, and I do get like that. If I try to like lash out, this dude's gonna fuck me up. Like, that's all there was to it. So, very humbling the first time. And I know everyone can kind of say that, but to me, I was like, oh, I'm going to go in there. Like, I had always horsed around with friends who had maybe like done a jiu-jitsu class or something and was able to like hold anybody I wanted to down. But I was also bigger than most of my friends too. So it was like, I was going in there with that mindset and very quickly had it beaten out of me. Like, in the best way possible. John was an absolute like gentleman about the whole thing. He was helping me the whole time. Like, oh, you should be putting your hands here. You should be like avoiding this.
But he was a gentleman.
He was
kindly killing me.
He was kindly killing me in the best way possible. But so that was like my very first experience. And then once I got to Team Trifecta / BTT at the time, that really changed my perspective because that was a very like kind of traditional Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like flowy kind of like very akin to like surfer style like theory of like, oh man, we're all here to like hang and like chill and like learn something really cool at the same time. Like, we used to roll to like reggae all the time. We used to like do all these like very like kind of like cliche Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff when you start reading about the culture. Having said that, my instructor at that time was straight from Brazil. This guy, Bruno Amaral, he lives in Florida now and coaches down there. And he's a very successful black belt with coaching. Works with the fighter Buchecha, who's a multi-time ADCC champion, which is like the Olympics of Jiu-Jitsu essentially. And I had him as my first coach, and he taught me so much stuff in terms of just his style and like how this shouldn't be like this. While you should be training hard, it doesn't have to be like this like constant like tense fighting. You know, he kind of gave me that theory, which was for me coming from wrestling, having my whole life of that was literally the opposite. In wrestling, you're just taught like, hey, you have 6 minutes, you should be like sprinting until you're dead for 6 minutes. You know what I mean? There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You just go until you can't. In jiu-jitsu, even my first tournament or whatever, he told me at the end, he's like, dude, like, I don't know why you're working so hard. like you shouldn't, like, this is competitive and you're doing it, but you're like wasting all your energy in like one spot and you're not spreading it out through these, 5-6 minutes, whatever the match time was. So.
Right. Now, why did you keep going back after you got tossed and wrecked?
Yeah.
Like you got the shit kicked out of you and you're like, I'm coming back.
Yeah. So I'm sick, man. Like I'm obviously not the only one with this mindset by any means. But when I find that I'm not good at something, and it's kind of this like fine line I walk. So it's like, if I'm not good at it, I might just not put any effort into it at all. But if I have an interest in it and I just want to get good at it, or I feel like there's an opportunity for me to get good at it, I want to milk all that opportunity I can. That was the prime thing with jiu-jitsu for me. I'm like, I have this background. I have that, like, the wrestling is a huge, if you talk to most Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys who started later in life, like in their, after high school or early 20s, stuff like that. And I roll with them now, train with them. Everyone says the same thing. Oh, I wish I did wrestling in high school. Ironically, like all through high school, the wrestling team get made fun of, looking like, oh, you guys in your, this isn't going to be PC to say, but what was said to me at the time was like, you guys in your outfits and stuff like that. Like, look at this, like you wearing that silly uniform. I don't want to wear that. And true, I think that's something actually they've moved away from now in wrestling. Now they kind of do more of like the typical jiu-jitsu, like a rash guard and shorts. Like that's more. In college, they still wear the singlet, but in high school now, they've kind of changed that. And which is good because I think it gets more kids involved. Because as much as no one wants to admit it, when you're this kid in high school who has like, you're already struggling with confidence, you're trying to find girls, you're trying to do all these other things, and now all of a sudden somebody wants to put you out in front of the entire school in spandex and be like, oh, you might lose and be over the paper tomorrow or whatever. Like, that's horrific. Whether anybody wants to admit it, like, that sucks. Like, and to me, I didn't think anything of it because I was like, oh, this is just what we wear. Like, it'd be like wearing football pads. Like, why, like anything else? This is the uniform for my sport. Like,
I never thought of that till just now.
Yeah.
I never thought of it.
But that was a huge thing. Like, if you talk to somebody, like, that would always be their reason. Oh, I don't want to wear that. Like, and, that's crazy. I think part of it was like fear. Nobody wants to like be uncomfortable. And it's a very uncomfortable sport. You're in close contact. You're like, it's aggressive. Yeah. It's, it's biggest thing more than anything, it's you as well. Like there's no one else. Like no one can miss a block, no one can miss a shot, no one can do anything. If you screw up, that's it. Like maybe your coaching could be better. Maybe even now when I think about it, and the next thing I was about to say was like, maybe you could have worked harder. Like that's it. Like it's you, dude. Like there's that's a big aspect. And kids are obviously more athletically inclined than others, so like it definitely, kids have an advantage just going into it. Kids start their junior year of high school and become state champions. It's rare, but like it's genetics. Somebody gets a shitty role somewhere, somebody gets a great role, so like coming up on that, it's like overall very intimidating if you're not used to it. And to have that pressure of like not being able to turn to the guy next to you and together share your loss, like that loss all of a sudden becomes very difficult on you. And it was, and you never really get used to it. Like at least I never did. I know people definitely got better with it, and I think in certain aspects or whatever, and I probably improved over time. But man, like every loss I took hard. Like it was never like, oh, whatever, I was supposed to lose. Like, yeah, man, maybe I was supposed to lose, but I didn't show up to. Like, I wanted to win. Like that's all there is to it. Like if I showed up, any other way, like why bother being there?
Yeah,
So,
right, exactly. Like, why even bother coming if you're planning to lose?
that's exactly it.
Like, why would anyone just be happy to be here?
And
at any
so
sport?
inherently for me, that became the obsessive part of it. Like I was just like, oh, like this just needs to be my life, because I think it being my life is the only way to even have any success.
Right.
And when I understood that more going into my senior year of high school, I worked definitely harder during the off season. I went to camps and stuff because I was funding it myself at that point. I was like working a job to pay to go, and I had made good connections just through helping other people and stuff like that, that I was invited to camps for free. I was very lucky that like my senior year, Johnson and Wales College, Johnson and Wales University, I got to go up there and wrestle with them a lot. And being in high school, that's like a huge deal. And while they're D3, they're also multi-time national champion D3 school for wrestling. So it was like really high talent level. And being a kid in high school, you're going in there against these guys in college that are like, you're thinking to yourself, these are like, in your eyes, grown men. So you're like, oh my God, like this is like terrifying. And that actually translates really well to, you know, oh, well, I just went against this dude who's like an adult, and now I'm going against this, you know, idiot from whatever insert school the next day. It's a lot easier. So that helped a lot. But, you know, I still took my losses. I still did, like I said, I finished 5th or whatever, which sounds good, but in Rhode Island, you know, it's good, but it's not great. You know what I mean? It doesn't get you to New England's, which was my ultimate goal. So
what do you need to get to New England's?
Top 3.
Ooh, that's close.
Yeah. It was ironic. There's a kid who beat me a lot of high school. Same kid, this kid Jesse. He would beat me throughout most of high school, and in my senior year, our first match of that year, I beat him, and it was like the first time I had beaten him. So it was like we didn't face. He actually didn't wrestle me in our dual meet. They had him wrestle the heavyweight, and I wrestled the kid that was the weight class below, who they bumped up because they didn't want us to face each other. Because if I won again, I would end up being the higher seed against him at the tournament. And then, of course, we get to the semifinals of the tournament, and I think he pinned me in like 45 seconds.
Money's on the table.
That's
it,
man. I couldn't. Just the dice was not there for me.
And Jesse James coming through, coming in hot.
So it was tough. It was, and you know, I think to my own, to point out a flaw of myself at that time too. When that happened, I thought to myself, like, you know, at that loss, I was like, all right, well, my goal here was not to be any better or any worse than first place. So when that happened too, I was like, I didn't really give a shit about the rest. I had 3 more matches or whatever, and I was like, couldn't even be bothered. I was just showing up to like, all right, let's get this over with. I'm wrestling because I don't quit. But outside of that, I don't want to be here right now. So it was a different story at the time.
What are your goals now with jiu-jitsu, now that you've been doing it for many years? Where do you want to go with this? Like, what do you want to do? Are you just doing this for fun, just to stay in shape, or like what are you kind of doing with this right now?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like when all is said and done, and I get my black belt and everything else, more than any other tournament or anything else that I would want to win. Obviously, that's up there. There's stuff, and we can talk about that. But like, I think my real true goal is to just teach jiu-jitsu. Like, when I teach somebody something and then I see them hit it on somebody else, or I see them use it effectively in a tournament or something, that to me is like the same gratifying feeling that I was getting when I was doing it myself. So like that to me is really, really cool. And I think that I would like to do that for a lot of people, you know, like on a big scale. And I think that there's definitely, and I'm not the one to lead the charge. I don't think there's plenty of people already doing it, but I think that there's a lot also to be learned from like wrestling style practices in terms of intensity and how you treat things that could be a benefit to a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools. It's almost at times, while not always in tournaments, it's almost times like the culture is almost too friendly as well. Like it's, having said that, everyone has a story about going into somewhere and getting like smashed on way harder than they needed to be and everything else. But along with that is like you kind of develop this like and I found myself doing it at times. It's almost like being too kind about things, and even in training, you know, like I kind of get the things said to me all the time. Like there's guys that are in way better shape than me, maybe like physically, but like I'll roll or train, however you want to say it. I'll train for literally forever. Like I just don't stop.
Right.
And I think that's from just like I know what the standard has to be for like wrestling. That's always my mindset, is like, this is the cardiovascular I need. So like I'm always pushing to that level of what I would need for that. And that has set me up with a really good base, I think, now to just kind of keep going. And I think bringing some of those aspects in of like hard conditioning in that sense, I think is already there at the top level, but it's not really there like always regionally.
Right.
And I think, well, I don't know if I'm going to coach anybody to ADCC someday. Hopefully I will. But I think that at least having people have good basis to understand what like that work ethic is a very important part of not only life, but I think jiu-jitsu. And I think it can help in a lot of ways. So if I can bring that and, you know, any type of success to anybody, or even just if I'm not their head coach, but I just show them a cool move and they go out there and they hit it in a tournament and they're like, or, you know, whatever, they hit it in practice. I have guys come up to me and they're like, dude, you showed me this last week. I've been hitting it on like 3 people, like at class. And I'm like, oh, that's incredible. Like what's cooler than that, you know?
Right.
And I think that would be my ultimate goal in terms of competitiveness and everything. Honestly, I would love to win worlds, not like overall for open weight or open class in terms of age, but I think already at 31, I'm in the masters division, which like I joke around saying is the old man division already, and like it truly is. But like I would love to win a masters worlds one day as a black belt. That would be like my ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. More than anything else, just to like have something to hang my hat on.
Right.
That would be the best thing I think for it. So I've won, you know, local tournaments, I've won super fights and stuff like that. And that feeling is always amazing. But that to me is like who doesn't want, no matter what your age is, no matter what, within these qualifications, you're the best in the world is what I would want.
Right.
That no matter what those qualifications are, well, you know, that's what I would strive for. So.
Right. Do you have any horror stories from any time you've been rolling around? Do you have anything crazy that's going on? Like anything like maybe that you've snapped or like anything like that's been snapped of yours or anything like that?
So I had my worst injury was, I have a pretty bad injury one time with my knee. And this was, so I was going against somebody from one of our, basically it's my instructor's coach's school, which is also in Providence. And we were just, you know, in an intense round. The guy at the time, I think, was a brown belt. He's actually a former UFC fighter. This guy, Eric Spicely. We were going at it or whatever, and I went to go hip toss him, and he's a brown belt. He knew exactly what was happening, and he did all the right stuff. So he hopped to the other side, and I had my leg extended at the time, and so I'm doing this hip throw, and with my leg extended out, he essentially landed right on the outer aspect of my knee. So kind of going from this, my knee, I swear, and I mean, this is probably exaggeration, but what it seemed to me at the time was that my knee touched the ground, like laterally. And it was an audible pop. Everyone stopped, like the mat stopped. And like, that was really bad. I ended up with like a grade 3 sprain of my MCL, and I tore my MPFL, which holds your kneecap in place. So that was torn. And then the grade 3 sprain of the MCL was probably the weirdest feeling injury I've ever had also, because I'll never forget this. Like standing up, I could walk, but like I felt as though if I did any lateral movement at all, whether that was even just a step, it would just feel like my knee would keep going. Like there was nothing stopping my knee or like giving it stability. Like it would just feel like as if I was like taking that step, it was just floating into space somewhere.
How long did that feel like that?
I'd say that particular feeling was probably close to like a month, but before my knee felt like good again was a long time. Yeah. It was really a long time. And that was actually like right before I stopped training for that block of time too.
Really?
So yeah, so probably for the benefit of that too was like in that time period, because I remember even going back to training once it started feeling a little bit better and not having any confidence in it.
Yeah.
Like literally, like I mean, jiu-jitsu has so much dynamic movement with your knees, and whether that's submissions being applied to you or how you're passing or any of those things, or even takedowns, so much is dependent on, you know, the movement of your joints, obviously. And having that happen, I just said, like, I was like, once again, thinking to myself all the time, like, oh, this is just going to go at any moment.
Yeah.
Like, it's not if, it's when. So I haven't had anything like that since, luckily, knock on something, but outside of that, I've had little stuff. I mean, I think everybody, I don't think it's really possible to get by without something in jiu-jitsu just by the nature of what it is.
Right.
Because there's even going to be times where you just don't understand something. Like my first tournament I ever did, I got choked completely unconscious, and it was, so I went totally out. And it was because I just didn't know what was happening. Like literally the guy was on my back. I went to go throw him, fucked up the throw terribly. I ended up on all fours on the ground. He hopped on my back and he had my head and my arm. And I was like, oh, he's behind me. He's not like, he can't finish me from here. And I was like, it just hurts. And then I woke up.
It just hurts.
It's like, it just hurts.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, like, there's like a fine line there where you think to yourself, like, this is no tough guy thing, but like a lot of people in jiu-jitsu realize this kind of, you come to this realization, there's stuff that people will do that just is painful, but doesn't really have like an end game of being debilitating to you. So you're like, all right, like I just have to deal with this shitty feeling. And then I'm on to the next move. And like, you know, you're screwed because you held on to it.
Right.
That was not the case here, obviously. So I'll never forget, literally, like, it was the strangest thing. My aunt was not there, but all of a sudden, the thought process in my mind was, this guy's not choking me. And the next thought was, why is my aunt here? Why is my aunt yelling? And I'm like, that's weird. Like, when did she show up? Did she show up and not tell me? I didn't even tell her this was going on. And then I'm opening, like I remember blinking and like kind of like coming to, and I see the ref, and the ref is the one who's like rubbing my back at this point. And he looks at me and he's like, hey, you know what happened? And I was like, dude, no exaggeration. I burst out laughing and I'm like, I just got choked unconscious, didn't I? And he goes, sure did, buddy.
You sure did, buddy.
So
what a guy.
I was like, all right. So I got up and I obviously lost that match. Luckily, my now wife was, well, not luckily that she was there, but luckily she stuck with me after that because that was the first time she ever saw me do jiu-jitsu, and I brought her to this tournament.
Oh my God, that's insane.
And she just saw me get strangled unconscious. So, you know, she's the keeper that she stuck around after that. So,
how long were you training before you entered that tournament?
Jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Like 3 months.
Oh, really? So you're very, very new.
Yeah, I was just like, dude, I wrestle. Like, let's just do this. Like, I was like, if worse comes to worse, I just won't let them submit me and I'll just take them down.
Yeah.
And neither of those things worked.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like literally insane.
It's like, it's just, yeah, I was very confident in it. And, you know, like, I think that at the time too, like this particular tournament, if they know you're a wrestler, will kind of bump you up to a higher division because they don't want people doing, like, they don't want people sandbagging, essentially, like signing up for a lower level than what they actually are. Because then it's not worth it to anybody either if you're going out there and smashing all these people that have no chance, you know?
Right.
So if somebody's brand new, never did any martial art in their life, and then all of a sudden they show up and, you know, you both sign up for the very beginner's bracket, and you've been wrestling for, you know, 25 years, and then all of a sudden this kid's like, I don't even know what a takedown is. Like, that's an issue. So they try really hard to do that. So I think I got bumped up to like the quote unquote intermediate division, and whatever, no excuses. Like I still was very confident leading into that I was going to, you know, at least win a match.
At least stay awake.
Yeah, at least not get literally strangled unconscious. So
have you been put out since that?
Very close, but I can't remember a time where I've truly been out. There's been times where like I've probably like the lights went out for a second, but like the release was at the same time. Yeah. So it kind of like you come back to. I do not support going out by any means. There's some evidence out there that the more I read, like that completely going out is definitely not great. And I know that sounds obvious, but like the common thought process is like literally a joke in jiu-jitsu. Like everyone's like, you take a nap.
Yeah.
Like it's like the idea is that if it's a joint lock, you tap. If it's a choke, you just take a nap.
That's insane.
Yeah. And, you know, not saying I would never in a big tournament not just go out, but like the fact of the matter is you really, like training's not worth it. It's the same thing I think of as like as a boxer. You shouldn't be going into training thinking that you're going to spar full force and just try and KO people. Like that's dumb. Like why would you do that? You also probably shouldn't be letting yourself get strangled unconscious in training.
Right.
And I think that's like my advice for the day. Yeah.
I'm going to try to reiterate this the best I can. I was reading this study the other day about jiu-jitsu, and what they did was they took 32 participants that were war veterans, all of which suffered from PTSD. Every single one. They had every symptom you can even imagine. So what they did was they put these people through jiu-jitsu classes, and none of them had any prior experience with jiu-jitsu at all.
Wow.
So they put them through these classes, and they measured their symptoms after every 20-hour period of jiu-jitsu. So I'm not sure exactly how many days that is, but probably like a week or two time frame, maybe we'll put it into that perspective. And what they found was after every 20-hour period, all the symptoms that these people had were reduced significantly. And as time went on, these symptoms were replaced by mindfulness, confidence, like all these different things. And the study went on to say, found that jujitsu subconsciously also helped people deal with their emotions,
Sure.
which is probably why the study also said alcohol intake in these people were reduced as well, because you're not using that Band-Aid to cover it up.
Sure thing.
Have you seen any of those benefits from jujitsu, whether it's mindfulness, just, I guess, self-confidence, more peace, like anything like that at all?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Right off the bat, like the biggest thing in me that changed was going from this kid, 21, whatever it was at the time, so still a kid, from that mindset of like literally, like I felt like I always needed to fight everybody, like all the time. Like I just had this mindset of like to protect myself just from my upbringing and everything, that if anything were to happen or you were going to say anything against me, it was just like, well, let's just fight and get this over with. Like it was just
Let
like,
me end you.
yeah, like that's it. And like what else is there? Like you can talk shit or you can do anything else, like whatever you want, but like when it all comes down to it, it's just a fist fight. So
Right.
let's just do this then. Let's skip all the other parts and go to it. And like that was always my mindset. And if I felt uncomfortable, it was always just use that to go out, like use that as my aspect to like avoid maybe the situation, even
Right.
subconsciously. You know what I mean? Like I was thinking to myself, like even in that mindset of like, if I can just be or present myself as a tough SOB at that time, like, and just, have the confidence that like, all right, if it does go down, I'm at least willing. Most people aren't willing. They'll talk a big game, but they're not willing. So it would just get me out of the situation. And, at the time I thought that was the right way to do it. Starting jujitsu, I think those feelings initially, like I said, were obviously there. Even when I was with, John Howard that first time, like
Right.
I was like, oh, like this is frustrating. Just let me fight my way out of it or whatever. Like that definitely was put on the back burner for me. I got to a point where I have no interest in fighting. Like in my mind, like, if something were ever happen, I had to defend myself. Maybe it's just because of that. I'm
Right.
very well aware of what I'm able to do now. I mean, it's like self-defense wise, not in like a tough guy way or anything, but just like if a situation goes down, I don't even have to like worry in the sense, obviously if there's a weapon, it's different, but I don't have to worry in the sense that like I'm going to be as harm to somebody who's not trained at all. I can, if nothing else, hopefully hold the person down and just wait until help arrives. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like
yeah.
that's the number one thing I would want to do, more than anything. So that and the realization that like I was getting my ass kicked by guys that were just guys that I wouldn't expect to be able to kick my ass at all, really changed my tune, because you kind of just start looking at everyone very differently. I'm not like, oh, in my mind before it was the biggest dude around, right? Like I would think to myself like, oh, that super jacked dude or whatever is probably the baddest motherfucker in here. And, if he really wanted to, like you could just screw anybody up. And then I got to jiu-jitsu and I was like, oh, this dude who's like 145 pounds just literally strangled me with his legs. Like, what am I going to do to this kid? Like, there's not, like, if we were fighting and I threw a punch and he just happened to catch my head and arm at the same time, he didn't have to do anything besides just choke me unconscious.
Right.
And I think that really added to my sense of like, number one, safety. I was like, I don't know who anybody is. Like when I go to a bar, I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know when I go to a restaurant who these people are. So why the hell am I trying to fight them?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
That's just dumb. Like that's a silly mindset. And so that definitely helped me in that sense. And then for sure, like being like able to control my emotions was a big thing too, and which speaks to that initial part as well. Like when somebody has you in a bad position in jiu-jitsu, like there's very few things that are as uncomfortable as that. Like there's times when you'll have, I roll with big guys too, and like you'll have a guy who's 300 pounds who's on top of you, whose literal like chest and stomach is on your face, and you're trying to breathe and everyone's sweaty and you're sucking in like a sweat filled shirt with each breath, and you're like, you feel like you're being like suffocated, like waterboarded. And so you're there and you're like Christ, like what am I gonna do? And like that's where you address the concern and you really put your jiu-jitsu into use, where you can say like, this isn't like, I'm just uncomfortable. Like,
Right.
this isn't like a life or death situation. Like if nothing else, if I really do want to stop this, I always have an out.
Yeah.
I can always tap.
Right.
I don't want to do that in this situation because I should be using this to build my confidence here, in terms of being in an uncomfortable position, and being able to think clearly. And the more it's almost like some sort of like exposure therapy. Like you get a little bit of it at first, and then you just keep building more and more into it. And the more and more uncomfortable you get, eventually you just get comfortable being uncomfortable. You know
Right.
what I mean? And sounds maybe a little like cliche to say, but it's true. Like when you're stuck underneath somebody, or somebody's bigger than you, or somebody's just a lot stronger than you, and you're trying to handle the situation in a role, and while you're training, if you start panicking, you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
Like, there's no other way. Like, it's a very technical thing. Like, yeah, you can grip and rip stuff or whatever the case is. You can do some dumb things that are gonna work maybe in that moment, but they're not gonna work all the time. So what better time to apply your technical skill than when you're in a horrible spot? You know what I mean? Like, this is what this is made for. This is if somebody attacks me and I fall to the ground and they're on top of me and they're trying to hurt me. They're trying to physically hurt me. Like, this is great that I have an opportunity where somebody's not physically hurting me, but we're in the same spot. So like, when you're forced into that, it makes everything else seem a lot easier in that sense, like daily stuff. That helps a lot.
And I know we were talking about this the other day. It's like, there's very few things in this world that are more uncomfortable than another human sitting on top of you, basically. Like, if I were to just get up right now and sit on your lap, you'd be like, what is going on?
Right.
Like, never mind if I tried to strangle you. So
like, now go to jiu-jitsu and somebody literally straddles you as you're laying on your back, and they're like, oh, by the way, while I'm here, I'm going to try and like break your arm.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there's very few things that I can imagine I've done that are more uncomfortable than that.
Sure.
But I feel like, to your point, it definitely builds a lot of mental confidence and mental toughness. Because if you're put into like a situation like that on the street, obviously it's going to be a little bit different for a lot of reasons. Because like we've talked about, you can't just try to choke someone out with your leg, because if his friend sees that, he might just come over and just crush your neck.
Yeah. Somebody's going to come over and boot you in the face.
But
that's all there is to it. Yeah.
But along the same lines, if you are put in that situation, your mind's so trained, you're going to just know, okay, I've been here before. Not exactly, but you're not going to have to panic, and you're going to know exactly how to get out of it, or at least get yourself in a better position than you are right then and there.
And you have a good idea of your body too. Like, you get a much better idea of what you're capable of, in terms of everything in that sense, like just how to move your body. One of the biggest things, and like I'm sure you probably noticed this when you first trained for the first time, like the movements that you're doing are awkward. Like, in terms of a lot of people just don't know how to move their bodies. Like, that's literally it. Like, you came from some sort of athletic background, so you were already ahead of the 8 ball. But like, people walking off the street, man, they've never done anything and they're out of shape and they just want to get some exercise, and like they show up and they're great a lot of times, but at first, man, it's like watching like a baby giraffe. Like they're trying to move and you're like, oh God, like where do we start? Which is awesome though, because now you have this like fresh slate. Like, you don't have to break bad habits and stuff like that, which is the beauty of it. But at the same time, you really do realize like, oh crap, like there's some people that have no idea what they're doing, and those same people sometimes can literally be the same ones that are like so confident that if there was ever a fight, they'd be totally fine. And like, that's not to talk shit, because everyone has their own views of themselves and everything, and that's great. But your confidence can be misleading sometimes. Obviously, I say that very much now. My confidence could be misleading too if the situation was ever bad enough. But at the same time, at least I have like a lot of experience with this. Like, I've been at this point, man. Like, I don't know how many hours it truly is, but I'd have to imagine like hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours I've spent on a mat. And like, so to do that all the time, you really like. It's just like anything else. It's like, and if somebody who swims all the time being in the water, I hate that analogy. But it really is what it is. Like, you're just so used to doing that. You're used to doing these moves, and it's just like anything else. Like, if one thing, like you said, we talked about the other day during our conversation was like, if I want to get better at squatting, I squat more. If I want to get better at arm bars, I do more arm bars. If I want to get better at jiu-jitsu in general, just do more jiu-jitsu. And like, that's kind of the beauty of it. And I think right now in particular, we're seeing that a ton, because within the community, like instructionals have become like really like the hot thing. Like, there's a whole website dedicated to like these professional jiu-jitsu players that create instructionals, film them, and then put them out. And it's some of like there's a very clear in my mind, a very clear increase in talent level across the board right now, because people just have access to like what they would have to spend hundreds of dollars for a private lesson on, or maybe years before that class ever got to that technique if they went to that school with that instructor. Like, now they can buy the DVD, get a buddy, put some mats in their house, and like spend 3 hours drilling if they want to. You know what I mean? That's one technique. And you see it really, like, the level of jiu-jitsu has never been higher, and across the board. There's guys coming in now that are 18, but they've been training jiu-jitsu since they're 4 years old.
Right.
And these 18-year-olds are just demolishing grown men. Like, it's just how it goes, but it's because they've done this, they're 18 and they've already done this 10,000, 40,000, 50,000 times. You know what I mean? Like, these same moves. So now they're getting there. And it's just a whole different thing. And they can also add in all these other techniques that maybe they would never be exposed to if it wasn't for these new instructionals and stuff like that. So.
Right. I think it's kind of like that with everything. Like, I think just the ability to become knowledgeable about any subject has just like exploded over the last 10 years or so.
Right.
Like, if there's any topic that you're interested in, you can legitimately go home and start learning it like
100%,
tonight.
yes.
Like, it could be jiu-jitsu, it could be literally anything.
Yeah.
Like, at all. And it blows my mind that more people don't take advantage of that.
Well, it's tough, right? Because like we never, number one, like I think a big issue is that people are trying to figure out what they're passionate about.
Right.
And if they, when they're trying to figure out what they're actually passionate about, they're trying all these things out. And, sometimes you feel like you're putting in this effort and you really thought you were going to like whatever you're learning about. And then all of a sudden you start it and it's like, oh, I friggin' hate all this that's required for it. So it's like that, I think sometimes turns people off and they're like, oh, well, whatever. I'm just going to stick to what I know. And like, that's, in my mind, that's terrible because you're right. It's like we have the, quote unquote, while there's a lot of like fake stuff out there too, you essentially have like access to the Library of Alexandria right now, like in the world. You know what I mean? Like if you know the right places to go with the right access and the right tools, you can go online and become good at anything.
I 100% agree.
And it's, like I said, becoming more and more obvious with jiu-jitsu. There's even online, and I don't necessarily agree with this because I think you need a lot of like in-person practice, but there's obviously people doing it, so it must work in some sense. But there's online jiu-jitsu academies where it's just like a curriculum, and hopefully you're signing up with a partner or whatever, but there's an online curriculum and you go through it, and then you would actually send like a video, I guess, of yourself like performing X techniques, and they would promote you. I think they only, having said that, I think they will only promote you one belt. I think you actually have to go in person and do everything else.
Makes sense.
But that exists now. And, that just goes to show what we're talking about. Like, you can at least get somewhat base proficiency in anything. And if you can't get the base proficiency from what's provided, you need the real world experience. Like, the internet also opens the opportunity for you to contact those people.
Right.
Like, I can send a message to the best dude in the world right now of jiu-jitsu if I wanted to. Like, doesn't mean he's going to respond to me, but like, I have the opportunity to contact him. Like, and I've done it. Gordon Ryan, he's probably the best jiu-jitsu guy in the world right now in terms of no-gi. So rash guard and shorts, that's what no-gi is. And within that, it's hard to argue anybody else is better right now. That's just all there is to it. And I, at one point, sent him a message asking how much private lessons were. Having said that, way out of my price range. Like, not even, I just couldn't justify it. Couldn't justify it at all. But, like, fact of the matter is like, I could do that. I didn't need to, like, dude, 20 years ago, you would have had to have, like, taken a bus to where this guy lives or drive to where he lives.
Write him a letter.
Write him a letter. Hope for the best. Like, maybe get like a VHS that somebody else gave you that recorded one of his matches from these tournaments. And that's what people used to do. And like, so we're spoiled now, man. Like, that's all there is to it. And it doesn't always seem that way because it's still a lot of hard work. But back then, I kind of think it was a lot harder. I mean, there's guys that 100%. Will talk about like, oh, well, like, yeah, it was on whatever, You hear it all the time with like the first UFC, like a friend of a friend gave like a recorded VHS tape to somebody. They put it in, they saw this crazy UFC fighting, and from the first ever event, they couldn't believe it was even real. And then that's what led them to want to start fighting and stuff like that. And like, yeah, man, like that's what you had to hope that you came across a friggin' VHS tape. Like, dude, I can
hope and pray.
Walk over there, grab my phone and pull up everything they watched and more within 30 seconds. Like, and that to me is like, I kind of get roasted sometimes by some of the guys in class of being like just joking around, because I'll come in every day with like something new I want to like drill or try, or I'll joke around, like I hit a move and I'll be like, oh, I watched it on YouTube before I came in. And like, you shouldn't learn everything from YouTube, obviously, or anything like that. You should, learn real techniques, not just this flashy stuff or anything like that. I think that's a huge part of it. But you can also take your time, if you're willing, and learn the fundamental techniques just through YouTube still too,
Right.
which is great. And like this opportunity has never presented itself. So I think it's great that, you know, the people that do take advantage of it, you see it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's just more testimony to it. So
Was that virtual jujitsu, was that a COVID thing, or has that been around for several years?
I think it was like started a couple years before COVID happened. It definitely, there was a lot of like ideas of how to run things with during COVID. Like people were trying to just do like Zoom classes, and people were getting like, you know, dummies or whatever, or like dressing up pillows and trying to do techniques on pillows. And it was weird, man. Yeah, I don't know. I was lucky enough that I had like a small group of guys that I trained with pretty consistently throughout the pandemic,
that's good.
who were all very honest with each other. Like if somebody had any concern at all, they would just be like, "Hey, I'm out this week," or anything like that. Or, and I was very clear to everybody. I'm like, guys, like I literally work at a hospital. Like
I am the person you don't want to see.
Yeah, like so you guys, like I'm your risk. So if you're willing to train with me and everything like that, that's cool. But like if you ever tell me no, I'm never gonna be like pissed.
Yeah.
Like and then. You know, luckily no one got sick the whole time. We all improved, I think. And I think having to like kind of guide our own learning during that period of time was helpful too, because we all got to kind of like get better at stuff that we were, you know, different positions or whatever that we were more comfortable with or wanted to get more comfortable with. We were able to like focus our energy as opposed to kind of having to follow like class curriculums or anything like that, which was good.
What did your school do? Did they just shut down?
Yeah, for a few months they shut down.
Wow,
I want to say till like July maybe or something.
July.
Yeah. So March to July, and then coming back. I mean, this is what they had to do. So I'm not knocking them by any means, but it was lame, man. They were doing like you were getting like assigned spots on the mat and doing like solo drills. It was kind of like if you ever like drive by and you see like. Or if your mom's ever telling you that's like, I signed up for kickboxing, like, and you know, you like see what the kickboxing she's doing is, and it's really just like somebody in front of a class telling them to punch and like kick, and they're not really ever doing any real technique. It's just kind of like to get your heart rate up. That's what I felt like was going on in jiu-jitsu at the time. It was like, we're kind of doing like
wild.
like no offense to any women, but like a women's like cardio kickboxing is like what it felt like.
That's insane.
You know, yeah. So it was weird times. It was very weird times. And then we went through a period of time with like having to wear masks while we trained.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah, dude. I mean, like to me, this is the craziness of it. Is like I'm literally hanging over you, sweating into your eyes and mouth, like. This mask is doing nothing at that point. Like it's just not realistic. And it's not saying that that's not a knock on masks. It's just like we're agreeing to do this thing where I'm literally all over you.
Yeah.
Like we can't stop it like at all. I'm sweating on you. I'm breathing in your face,
God,
like whatever the
crazy.
case is. And then you're gonna try and wear like, what is this? Like it just doesn't make any sense.
I feel so bad for all those kids out there that are playing sports and are still wearing masks.
Yeah, man.
I'm thinking I could never, not a million years could I ever do that. I would be so frustrated. Like my ego would 100% take over.
Yeah,
Like, it wouldn't
for
be
sure,
close.
man. For sure. I was getting frustrated when I was, when I was doing it, man. Like whatever the mask was, like, you know, and it's starting to fall down, and then you're trying to fix it, and somebody's friggin' trying to rip off your arm on the other side, and you're like, dude, what am I doing with this thing right now? Like, what is the end goal here? Like, so eventually that went to the wayside once they kind of went lax on all of that, and much better now.
Yeah.
For sure.
Now, do you think jiu-jitsu has, I guess, an effect on your attention span, you could say? Because if you think about it, if you're not paying attention, you could be dead in a second. You could be unconscious, as we talked about earlier. Yeah. Do you think that has any impact? Do you think maybe that's a placebo thing? Like, how do you feel about that?
No, so definitely, like don't get me wrong, people can definitely be like distracted during jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, but if you're there to like truly train, I think that's also one of the best mental health aspects of it. While jiu-jitsu is not therapy in any sense, therapy is therapy. That's a separate thing.
Right.
That's something that's, you know, needs to be addressed outside of jiu-jitsu, because you address the actual problem. You're not just forgetting about it. Jiu-jitsu does give you, you know, 90 minutes every day to say like, hey, if I don't think about this dude trying to do this armbar, if I don't think about this person, right, if I don't think about this person trying to pass my guard, I'm going to lose, or I'm going to have, you know, I don't want to lose no matter what it is, whether it's the guard pass or the armbar. Like, I have to consider that. Like, I have to think about it. So if I'm thinking about anything else, it's going to happen, and that's just not how it goes. It's like, so it definitely helps my attention span in the moment for sure. I don't know about necessarily like outside of it or anything like that. I don't know that I'm any better at paying attention, but to that point though, at the same time, if you put me in front of like a jiu-jitsu instructional, I'll sit there and take notes for hours. So maybe it does, I don't know, but definitely in the moment for sure. You can't think about anything else. And that's kind of what I used it for a lot of times too, especially like when I first started. Like at that time, I just found out about my dad being pretty sick and everything too when I first started doing jiu-jitsu. So it gave me an opportunity to like spend a dedicated 90 plus minutes, whatever I was willing to go that day, a dedicated time where I was just like, oh, I don't have to think about anything besides this right here. And so that was like mentally a huge help at the time. But like I said, to get any like solutions to the problem, you really need to get it addressed. But within the moment, in terms of like needing to point your attention somewhere else, it really is very, very, very helpful in that sense. So, and I think a lot of people use it that way. And it just gets to the weird gray line of like, some people really do think that they don't need to do anything else because they feel good during that time, and then they get the endorphins and they go home and then they just reset the next day and they feel like shit until they get there. And that's not the goal. You want to feel good all the time.
Right.
And this should be something that enhances that. It shouldn't be the only thing though. And so I think when more people realize that, which a lot of people do already, obviously, but when people really put effort into that, you know, I think that's where you become your best self, obviously, is getting the help that you need, and also finding a hobby that you're passionate about and being able to, you know, make this weird amalgamation of the two to be successful.
Right.
So
the way I've felt that maybe it enhances your attention span is it just gets you off your phone for like a couple of hours. That's what I've thought, because I've read studies where your attention span is completely destroyed by being on TikTok and Instagram and all the social media, like completely destroyed. And I notice it in myself. And maybe this is just a placebo thing, but I've noticed if I spend a lot of time on Instagram, then I'm not nearly going to be as focused on whatever I'm reading, like say, as I get off of it. And I saw something yesterday that every time like you're working or you're reading something, whatever the case may be, and you pull out your phone or you know, look at something else, maybe it's just you Google something, it takes an average of, I think it was 20 minutes to get back to that flow state and get back into that full forced, focused state that you were in. Yeah. Which is crazy to think about, because you're like, all right, let me just, okay, done. That 20 minutes gone right there. Right, just imagine that much time. And that's once. Yeah. Now imagine doing that not even 10 times, like 5 times. That's like so much time. That's almost 2 hours right there. Yeah.
If you think about it, just, I mean, you pull out your phone, what, like, you know, 10, 15 times in a day, there's like
in an hour.
Majority of your, there's like, I'm just saying, you even do it just throughout the day and there's like most of your day gone right there, right? Like if you add up the amount of time, like between hours awake, between hours doing work, between everything else, like that's a huge hindrance. You definitely can't use your phone during jiu-jitsu. So that's a great, great benefit. You're right. Like
absolutely.
You can't, and that's a great point that you make. Like being able to dedicate, like I was saying too, like that 90 minutes plus to just like, this is what I'm doing. I can't allow my focus to go anywhere else really. That's not to say when a technique's being shown and I've seen it for like the millionth time, I don't have to like remind myself like, Matt, you still need to pay attention. Like, but having said that, like I understand why I'm there and what the job is. Like the funny part is, to your point, like I don't even want to look at my phone. Like there's never, like if I'm just sitting here or I'm at work or whatever and like I have nothing immediately going on, I'll just think, oh, just take it. It's almost like a
nervous tick.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's a great point. And so like I'll go to do it and you almost get that urge. I never, even during our breaks, like we get a water break before we start sparring, and like I don't even want to look at my phone. I don't even have a desire to. I do because like now having a kid, I'm like, oh, I hope everything's good at home.
Yeah, right.
But I look at it and I say, okay, I didn't get any messages. I'm good to go for another 30 minutes or whatever to train right now.
Right.
And all my focus then goes to that. So it's nice because I'm very guilty of that. I'm terrible with my phone. I spend a lot of time checking it. I spend a lot of time doing these things. And I see it in myself and I can't stand it. It's a big thing I think I need to work on too. So I never really even pieced that together, but that's a great point, that it's like gives you the opportunity to not even think about it.
I try my best to leave it in a different room, or if I say like I'm going to work at the club, I'll leave it in the car just so I don't look at it, especially working at a desk all day, looking at the computer all day. I don't need any more blue light. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? I don't
right.
need any more of that. I'll be okay with a few hours without
Trying
it.
to sleep well.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing. Obviously, I don't have a son, so it's a little bit easier for me to say,
Sure.
anyone has a problem, I'll get back to you later.
Right.
But yeah, I just feel like I'm happy when I'm not on my phone, like in general. I feel like I feel like my mental health's better. I just feel like I'm in a better mood. I feel like I'm more in the moment. I love everything about it.
It's like a little drug. Like you want that, and it's ironic because you keep going to the well. You're like chasing the dragon, where you always want that like little fix of like something cool that you see, or somebody says something to you, or anything else. And it's like you're checking it, and that's making you miserable. And you're willing to just have that little bit of miserable time to like get that little benefit at the end, whether or not you're realizing it. I think that's kind of what everyone's doing.
Right.
Like, and so it's when you can be comfortable without it and all those other things and get your, at that point, I'm getting my joy and fulfillment from something else totally. Like that's like that's replacing that little tiny hit. I'm hitting like, the mouse that's going over to the little, there's that test where the mouse went over to a little drum of cocaine and was getting the cocaine hit all the time. Like that's what it is with your phone. Like you're going to the phone to get that little hit of dopamine or whatever it is. And when you go there, it's like, if it's not there, you put it away and then you hope that it's there the next time. And then like you just keep doing this process. And like, in reality, it's the worst thing. Cause in those times you're not getting it, you're like, you feel, I don't want to say unfulfilled, but not by any means, but like you're just not getting what you went there for. So it's almost like demoralizing.
Yeah. And you end up in this vortex. Like I was talking with Ferrara about this the other day. There's times I'll have like, a couple of minutes to kill, whatever the case may be. And I'll say, let me check my phone. And before you know it, 20 minutes goes by. I'm on this random person's profile I don't know. And I'm like, what led me here? I legitimately don't understand how I got here. Which is crazy to think about. Cause
I'm lost and scared.
Because a lot of people do this. And I don't think people realize how bad it is, not only for your health, but just, for everything.
Oh, so many aspects.
We could sit here and just have an entire 2-hour podcast about how it's so bad for productivity, for your health, like all of these different things. And it's wild because I don't think it gets enough attention. And it's scary because we're in a place in this world where I don't think that can be corrected.
No.
Because there's too much money to be made out there by doing it.
It's part of us now.
Yes.
That's kind of like the scary thing. Like, I know, we talk about Joe Rogan all the time or whatever, but he's talked about it too with, in the grand scheme of things, phones are, making us kind of like those androids that we've always are so terrified, like this artificial intelligence. Like it's already here. We're holding it. We're carrying it. This is now part of us. Like our memory bank even. Like, dude, like when I was a kid, I had everybody's phone number stored in my memory. Like I just knew everyone's number. Like that was all there. You had to. You didn't have a choice. Like what was I going to do? Write it down? I'm a little kid. Like I don't carry around like an address book or anything. I had everyone's number memorized. I know like my wife's number, my number. And that's probably it. Like realistically, like that's the end of it. Like that's where it ends. And like it's because I don't have to. I know I don't have to. So why my brain just automatically says, okay, you don't need that. Just keep going on. Like now this has become my brain. You know what I mean? Like in a sense, that's really weird and terrifying.
Yeah.
Like you're losing. I know we don't see it this way, but you're losing that little bit of humanity. I think that like is a key aspect because while you're not, it shouldn't change you as a person what you're doing and having this item, but like at the same time, like, you might as well just fuse that into you at this point. Like it's there and you're getting your info from it. I don't need to rely on anything else besides this little piece of information. The scary part is like, I guess at some point determining like what's the good information, what's the bad information, and what's your like input there. You know what I mean? Like that you can have when it's you memorizing everything or memorizing these facts, you know where it's coming from. You know all these things, blah, blah, blah. Like you read it or you went to a book or you were taught it. And then all of a sudden you go online and it's like you're hoping that whatever you click on, you trust, so that way you can get the information and it's good. And like we said, it's everything now. Even training jiu-jitsu, you like literally go onto your phone. I can go on YouTube, I can pull up the technique, and you and I can come over here and say, okay, what are we going to do with this technique? I didn't have to remember it. I didn't have to pull out a book with pictures and look. Like no, like I just have to. There it is. Like, and that's your memory, right? It's a fake. Like if we had like an external hard drive for our brain, it's now the phone.
It's like Inception. It's just a fake reality.
It is. Yeah. That's just all this is it right now. Like it's just Leo DiCaprio.
And the thing is, you don't even, going back to the phone number thing, you don't even need to remember them, because even if your phone breaks, you can just go on the computer. You can still FaceTime people on there. If you don't have a MacBook, you can still get on Facebook and message someone. You can get on Instagram and message someone. There's legitimately no need to remember a phone number these days.
Never.
Like, which is wild to think about, because
man.
I was the same way when I was a kid. I knew everyone's phone number. I either had it written down, or I remember my parents had like a whiteboard we would write down our friends' phone numbers on, or anyone's phone we need to get in touch with. Or if you really want to show my age here, we would look up numbers in a phone book.
Right,
like,
right.
Never done.
Archaic.
Yeah.
Archaic. Literally, they're going to look at that, and they're going to look at like stone tablets that were like chiseled.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, oh, this is the same picture.
Yeah, right.
They're not even going to know the difference.
It's insane. Anyway, back to the jiu-jitsu side of things. What are kind of some of the biggest myths that you hear about or see in jiu-jitsu? Because I always had kind of, it wasn't what I thought it was when I first started doing it. I was actually very humbled. I'm like, oh, this is actually safe. Sure. Like, for some reason, I don't know why, but when I was younger, I always thought like martial arts and like jiu-jitsu and all these things was like weird.
Sure.
Like I didn't understand why. I don't know why I had that conspiracy theory in my head, because it's not. But I think that's one of the myths I always had. And you had to be some, Conor McGregor, some, Khabib, some great fighter to do this stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not the case, obviously.
Yeah, I think so I think that's a great point. And like one thing I hear from a lot of people wanting to try all the time, everyone always tells you, they're like, oh, I've always thought about that and I really like to give it a shot. And then like you'll try and encourage them and they'll be like, well, I gotta kind of like get in shape first, or I gotta like do this or that first. It's always something. And you're like, what a lot of people don't understand is like, I'd say that's a big part of it, is that, man, we have people, I train with a guy right now, and he's in shape for a big guy, but he still, has some body fat on him and everything. And he's like he's very tall as well, but he's well over, like, he's almost touching 400 pounds.
Wow.
Like, and so you don't need to lose like the weight. Like, this is going to do that for you.
Yeah.
And while you're doing it, you're not only getting a good workout, but you're like learning something. You're creating new pathways in your brain. You're getting safer. You can like do all these things. And so this myth of like that you kind of need this like weird background to be successful with it or anything else, I think that gets pushed a lot, not necessarily from the jiu-jitsu community, but kind of from the outside because of how we see it. And it also doesn't help that our only exposure to what jiu-jitsu is kind of just the UFC, right? Like, there's not really like, I can't turn on ESPN and see like, I can see the college wrestling championships, but I can't see like, I can't see Abu Dhabi. I can't see the ADCC trials. I can't see any of these things. I have to literally know where to go on the internet to get these things. So, when your only exposure to it is just like, oh, it's this, niche part of this much grander sport that's all violence. I think that's intimidating to a lot of people. I also think people don't really know what it is. So a lot of people think that we're going in there and like punching and kicking each other. And that's like, for sure, like we don't do any of that in jiu-jitsu. Right. Like there's no striking. Maybe at some schools that really, really focus on self-defense, they'll teach you how to do some like basic stuff like that. But especially for sport jiu-jitsu, there's obviously no punching or kicking or anything. So it's like, that I think intimidates a lot of people, and they don't necessarily want to like show up if they think that that's what's happening. And particularly, I think another big thing too is like the age thing. A lot of people think to themselves like, oh, like I'm 40, I'm 50, whatever the case is. Like I can't show up and do this. Like, yeah, maybe you're never going to be like a world champion, or maybe you're never going to like whatever your lofty goals are, but you'll benefit from it. Number one, you're going to have, like we talked about earlier, better mental clarity. You're going to have just getting in better shape if you commit yourself to it. Like if you really want to do this, like you should, I would think, want to get yourself in shape, because it's only going to make you better. It's like that snowball effect. You start rolling downhill, and if you do the right things, the snowball is going to get bigger, and eventually you are the snowball that's just running over everything. You know what I mean? Like that's what you want. And so one thing kind of leads to another in that aspect. And so all these factors, I think, really intimidate people from it. People also see, the aspect of being uncomfortable turns a lot of people away. Like they're like, oh, like you guys are just going to go out there and like kind of like hold me down on the mat. Like for some people that have, particularly if you're like somebody who's coming from a traumatic past or has had a traumatic event, like the last thing you want to do is let another stranger hold you down. So now it's like they think they're going into this like unsafe, violent environment, and that's just not the case. Like Jiu-Jitsu, when it first was kind of being popularized by the Gracies and everything else, like they were badasses. Like they would essentially fight anybody and stuff like that. They did all these kind of like dojo storms where people would show up to their gym and thinking that they're better, and then they would fight them and, you know, beat them up and everything. But it's become something much different now where it's much more accepted for like everybody. And we're not punching, we're not kicking, we're not trying to like go storm dojos or anything like that. Like it's not like, it's not the Karate Kid or anything like that. Like it's something for everyone for sure on a different level. And that's kind of the beauty of it. It's, you get to choose it, right? Like if anything gets to a point where you're ever uncomfortable, you just tap out and that's it. Like there's not any aspect that has to go further. If that your tap is that you want to walk off the mat after that, like people are going to encourage you to come back, but like you can if you want. Like there's not like somebody swinging at your head as you're trying to get off the mat, you know what I mean? Like that's so safety really is there. Like of course freak accidents happen. I've had plenty of times where I've taken a knee to the face by accident when somebody's doing something else, but like to me that's akin to like playing basketball and going up for, you know, to block a shot and somebody that accidentally elbows you or something like that.
Exactly.
Like it's just there, it happens. And so those things definitely kind of contribute to people not wanting to start. But to me, the number one thing I always hear from everybody is that I need to be in shape first. And like, you truly don't.
Yeah.
Like, it may seem like you need to, and you're probably going to have a hard time initially, just like cardiovascular wise, but like you would too, if you were hopping on a treadmill and really putting an effort to running. You would, you know, if you were putting an effort to walking up, you know, setting the incline as high as you can and just walking, like all those things are going to be like tough for you at first. So no reason why this shouldn't be tough either, but the nice part is you're controlling that pace and you get to do what you want at the end. So
do you think, how big of a factor do you think UFC plays a part in it? Because I feel like it gets a pretty bad rep because of the UFC a little bit, because that's not what jiu-jitsu is.
Sure. So it's funny because like for somebody who just loves the aspect kind of martial arts, like at the heart of it, I think that UFC does the opposite for it. It like encourages people because they're like, oh, this is self-defense. This is like the truest, in their mind, like the truest form of being able to like, somebody's attacking you and you're able to defend yourself and you're in this situation to prove that this is better. The whole point of UFC 1 was to show which martial art was better. They just took all these different guys from all these different backgrounds, sumo, boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and the guy who did jiu-jitsu won. So that, you know, in everybody's mind was like, holy shit, how'd this guy win? He was like 100 pounds lighter than everybody. And he was strangling and breaking arms. Like, what the hell happened here? Like, this is if you chose everybody, he'd be the last one you'd expect.
Right.
And so I think that empowered a lot of people too, who thought to themselves like, oh, I'm not, you know, this big brute that's going to go out there and able to kick and punch people. Like, I'm this scrawny guy maybe, and this guy just did it, so why couldn't I now? And that's the essence of jiu-jitsu, right? It's like being able to be the smaller person and kind of use your control over somebody who's larger to defend yourself and you know, end a fight if you ever had to. So to people who are very into martial arts, it does the opposite. It really encourages them, I think, to want to do jiu-jitsu. But for somebody else, when they just see, they can't separate what the jiu-jitsu aspect is from what the striking or other combat sport aspects are. And if you don't know what jiu-jitsu is even, and then all of a sudden somebody says, oh, look, they're doing jiu-jitsu, and this guy has an arm bar, and the other dude's just kneeing him in the head the whole time, they're thinking, well, what's the jiu-jitsu part? You know what I mean? Like, they don't really know if they don't have any background in it, and some random person watching for the first time. So without knowing, I mean, like, I literally talk to people at work that are like, oh, you're going to jiu-jitsu tonight, right? You're going to, like, kick and punch? And I'm like, no, dude. Like, I'm going to, like, roll around on a mat with a bunch of sweaty dudes in pajamas. Like, that's what we do. Like, that's literally the goal of this. So it's definitely intimidating to some people, for sure, and understandable. So I think hopefully at some point being able to get jiu-jitsu on, like, a bigger scale, like being able to like showcase it a little bit more to like more of a larger population, getting people to pay attention is going to be the tough part. But once they do pay attention, I think it will kind of show that, like, you know, if you dig a little deeper, this isn't just this like horrific, violent thing. Right. You know, nobody's getting their heads busted open on purpose, or nobody's getting knocked unconscious, or nobody's doing any of those things. It's like, you choose what happens. You spar as hard as you want because you always have that. Like, if you want to go out there and be a dead fish on the mat and just freaking like do nothing and just let people pass you, like, sure, you're probably not going to get much better, but like that's your prerogative to do
Right.
that. Like, and I tell people that all the time. You should never be sitting out around. If you want to sit out around, like just go out there and let your partner just like do stuff to you. And when it gets there, just tap out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just do it, because that's reps for you too. Like that's anytime you can spend on that mat is beneficial, as long as you're putting some 1% of effort into it. You're going to be 1% better the next time. So that's, you know, or 0.5% even if you wanted to, but it's something more than yesterday because you did another rep. Whether
Right.
that was the escape, or whether that was just the attempt to escape, or whether that was recognizing in your head, like, oh, that's too far of an arm bar now, I have to tap. Like, well, okay, now you have that in your head. You know what your limit is. Like, it's all part of it. Yeah.
Now, how often do you see females doing this? Because I feel like that's rare. That
Yeah.
You see females doing this.
Sure.
So what percentage of people would you say are females that do this, that you see or that you've heard of, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. So I hesitate to put a percentage on it, but the number is definitely very small still. More and more women are coming into the sport. However, right now, particularly currently in jiu-jitsu, the larger group, I think, is trying to address a pretty big like sexual harassment / assault kind of culture that was coming from the start of jiu-jitsu. So we have a lot of work to do for sure to make women feel more comfortable. Having said that, I feel like women are realizing more, just because it's being able to be seen on a grander scale, that they can show up and do stuff and be, you know, this isn't just for brutes or guys or anything else. Like there's women that are great at this. And the sport, when you break it down, what jiu-jitsu is, like we were saying, is inherently a smaller person being able to control a larger person. And what better, you know, tool to have as a woman than that? You know what I mean? Like in terms of just self-defense.
Right.
Like you want, like, in reality, you're going to be, in most cases, the smaller person and as the woman. And so this is made for you. And you hope that, you know, I tell my wife even that, you know, just the self-defense aspects are inherently fantastic. You know, you don't have to try and get a belt. You don't have to try and do anything else, but you should like learn some sort of basics. So that way, if somebody tries to attack you, you at least know what you're doing. You're not this like kind of scared moving around, you know, person that doesn't know what's happening.
Right. At least you can get away, worst case scenario.
Yeah, you have, and you know, that's not always going to be the case, but like you have confidence that you can work towards
Right.
it. You know what I mean? That might be all you need.
Right,
It's just
exactly.
the confidence to do it, and you're not just that victim right then. Jiu-Jitsu has a lot of work to do in that aspect. Some of the highest ranking people have kind of hid some sexual assault and stuff like that within the community, and it's coming to light within the last few months. And I think it's just like anything else nowadays. We're trying to weed out the people that aren't good, and
Right.
We can with our platforms and everything else. And I hope that it makes women feel more comfortable by exposing these people that have been doing these things, because at least now we can point to and say, like, this guy's a scumbag, stay away from there. And you at least have other options. You don't have to be nervous about where you're going, because we can identify the assholes. And the more of that, the better in my eyes, because I think women are an invaluable, you know, part of our training too, just in every aspect. And when you can really learn how to train with a woman, it helps you too, because you're not trying to use strength. You're not trying to do these things. You're trying to work on your technique too, because
Right.
I don't like, it doesn't do me any benefit if I go out there knowing how much I can deadlift and all this other stuff, and all of a sudden I just decide to grab this girl's collar and throw her over. Like that, what did I do?
Yeah,
Like nothing.
that does
Like,
nothing.
Nothing happens here. There's no benefit for her or me. So it allows you to kind of like, hopefully, if you're smart, slow your game down, start, you know, trying your best to like work with your partner and do techniques the right way, as opposed to like, you know, maybe you're rolling with somebody else who is your belt level, who's on the same technique level as you, and that brute strength is what gets you the win at that time and
Right.
stuff. And you know, part of that is being comfortable too with just losing to a girl. Like
Yeah.
a lot of guys still have that issue, man. Like as much as nobody wants to admit it, like some dudes feel weird saying like, oh, this girl just choked me or whatever else. Like I know when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, my coach's fiance at the time, I don't think they were even married, also trained, and dude, she would fuck me up. And like at first
Really?
I was so like, I'm like, how is this chick doing this? I would get like angry once again during the roll, but like I would never, I would never do anything, obviously. And like, eventually I was like, oh, like this is a benefit to me. Like, if anything else, like I'm seeing like what she can do to me. Like, if I get good, like I can use as little effort as she's using on me, and like hopefully be able to do the same stuff.
Right.
Like, and that to me, the way I looked at it was like the shining example of like, get better and you'll just like, this won't matter to you. Like, this is your opportunity to see what she's doing with her size, her strength, and use that to my advantage to see like, how does she do this? How does she do that? And like, she became very successful. She just won a tournament not too long ago. Her name is Natalia Amaral, and she's fantastic. And she was one of the first women I've rolled with. And now there's, it seems like more and more, women are coming into the sport, which is, like I said, awesome. And there's a lot of opportunities. I know at Timberhill in Providence on every Monday, there's a girl up there who's a brown belt named Jenny, and she teaches a women's only class on Mondays. And like, there's more and more of those popping up. Maybe, more and more women's only open mats. So all these women are able to go there and they don't have to worry about guys being there, and they can work on whatever they need to work on. And that also gives a lot of women the opportunity to just get exposed to a class. Right. They don't have to have the intimidation factor of like, I'm walking into a school, I might be the only girl there, and there's 15 dudes on this mat that are all been training for forever, and then once they get comfortable, hopefully they decide they really like it, you know what I mean, and stick around, because it's awesome.
All right, so last question here before I let you go. I want to hear your elevator pitch. Let's say I've never rolled around before at all. Why should I start going to jiu-jitsu?
Why should I start going to jiu-jitsu? So my elevator pitch initially would be to just show you a picture of me of 280 pounds and then show you a picture of me now. Not that I'm some stud, but like, at least you can say like, you can be a fat slob, or you could at least be in halfway decent shape. But besides that, no. More than anything, I would tell somebody to give it a shot in the sense of exercise, number one. Number two, a place to learn how to protect yourself. And number three, give it a shot to also have an opportunity to grow with other people that have the same desires as you do. And when you get there, you start forming these opportunities. Like, man, few things in life make you closer than the person you're trusting to choke you all the time. Like, I'll be honest with you, like some of those dudes, man, like, it's not everyone. Like, people love to pretend that like jiu-jitsu truly weeds out assholes, but there's always some that make it through. Like, It's just life. I mean, we just talked about the sexual assault stuff. Yeah. Like, that's like, those fucking assholes still exist, and it sucks that nobody did enough to get them out before. But having said that, within it and everything, there's the opportunity to really grow with the other people that are doing the same thing. Absolutely. And like I was saying, like having the trust in another person that they're going to take care of you during this is a big deal. Like I go against guys that have really high goals of competing, and I have to trust that when they get my leg, that they're not going to, make it so I can't go to work the next day. And that's all part of it. And so those are big aspects, or at least the most important aspects to me. Definitely fitness, mental health, and being able to get better at something and put my energy into something. Because I think that, I'll probably butcher this, but what is it? The idle hands of the devil's work or something like that. Like whenever you don't have something going on, you have a lot of opportunity to do stuff that's not going to benefit you. And having some goal to like always work towards is something that's really important. So,
Matt, thanks for doing this. I've had a lot of fun taking these lessons with you. I'm excited to continue taking them. I'll see you next weekend because we're going away this weekend. Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for watching. Like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, everybody. Guys.